paper of the year, that is Economics 12, of course. So, I'm like overall, obviously, I'm sure you all must be quite happy because it was the last paper, and finally, all the board papers are finished with. Now, so obviously, let's quickly. I'm sure everyone would be excited to know how was the paper, what was the analysis. So let's go with the analysis in today's session. So we all know the question paper design. It was a bit different from the last year's paper because obviously the total number of questions were only 24, which was much lesser as compared to 30 last year. Also, the number, that is the total marks, was 80 as compared to 100 last year. So obviously this was an added advantage to this year's students. Moreover, if we talk about the actual paper, the marks wise difficulty level, that is how was the paper of 2018. Guys, I'm sure you all would agree when I say that the difficulty level was not that difficult. Rather, the paper was quite easy as it consisted more or less of easy and average questions. In fact, mostly questions were either based on NCERT or they were very direct. For example, like analyze the properties of indifference curve. What is indifference curve? Define it, or define fixed cost. So almost all the questions were very direct in nature. There were very few tricky, or we can say an average questions, but more or less the paper was easy. So obviously, according to marks, we can say approximately 39 marks was easy, 35 was average, and 6 was difficult because there were very few tricky questions, especially in macro there were. But in macro, mostly the micro section was more or less simple and easy, we can say. Okay, talking about the marks wise difficulty level, if we compare 2017 paper, that is the last year paper, with this year paper, we can easily say that this year paper was comparatively far more easier as compared to last year, because again, many questions were direct, especially the part of numerical. The proportion of numerical questions were far less as compared to the last year. So we can say yes, according to marks wise difficulty level, this year paper was comparatively easier. Okay, talking about numerical questions, guys, this year's paper only consisted of 22% numerical questions, approximately 18 marks, we can say. So these marks were assigned to numericals, and maximum paper, that is almost 80% of the paper, was theoretical based paper with, again, direct questions. So this was the proportion of numerical questions. Talking about section-wise numericals. So obviously in microeconomics, guys, in your first section, you had only one numerical. You had two numericals, actually, one 1-mark question and one 4-mark question. Both were from producer behavior and supply. So obviously, unlike what we expected, that, we all expected that, okay, there would be a numerical from elasticity of demand, let's say, or consumer equilibrium and demand. But in this year's paper, there was no numerical from consumer equilibrium, but rather we had a numerical based on elasticity of supply. And another 1-mark question was based on total cost, that is our cost, basically. So obviously in micro, there was only 2 questions of 5 marks in micro section. And talking about the macro section, it was more or less as we expected. That is, 1 question of 6 marks was from national income and aggregates, of course. And other 2 numericals, 1 of 3 and 1 of 4 marks, were from income determination. So this was somewhat what we expected, especially the MPC question, right? So we expected, the questions would be appearing from income determination, which it did. So this was the section-wise numerical questions. Okay, Rajesh is saying this NCERT-based marking scheme. Yes, Rajesh, this is what CBSE has suggested, the marking scheme. That is, it is suggested by the CBSE in the syllabus. Okay. Talking about the overall analysis of the economics board paper, we can say that yes, there was a change in the pattern, as the total questions were 24 and the total marks was 80 as compared to 100. But overall, the difficulty level was more average to easy, we can say, because again, direct questions were there. Then time constraint, we can say it was a bit lengthy because again, 80% of the paper was theoretical. You had to explain all the conditions of producer equilibrium, especially the MRMC approach question. You had to explain the properties of IC curve. Again, all these required time. So we can say that yes, the paper was a bit lengthy. Okay, talking about NCERT textbook, yes, most of the questions, direct questions, were based on NCERT content. And you would be delighted to know, guys, that more or less the questions, the answers to the, to direct questions were available on the Merit Nation's Ask and Answer platform. In fact, if you went through the 100 topmost questions, which we, delivered last week, I'm pretty sure you could have found out few of the answers from those 100 questions itself, because again, more or less the questions were theoretical. Okay, so having the analysis, having done the analysis, let's go to the answers. I'm sure you all must be, excited to know what were the answers, whether you did right or not. Okay, so let's start with section A, that is micro. We had 12 questions in microeconomics. Starting with the 1-marker questions, guys. 1-marker questions were rather easy. Like, we had to give an example of positive economics. We all know what is positive economics is, right? That is, it is factual in nature. So we know that higher interest rate will result in reduction in house prices. So this is a fact. This is a positive example of positive economics. So you could have used any of the example in this particular question, like as the answer. Talking about second question, define fixed cost. Very direct, very easy. What is the fixed cost, guys? Which is the cost which is incurred on fixed factors of production. So obviously this is fixed irrespective of the units produced by the firm. Okay, question number 3. We had to answer, when average product is maximum, what happens to MP? That is the marginal product. So it was quite simple. When AP is maximum, obviously MP is equal to AP, because we all know how the curve goes, right? Like, if this is our what we can say graph, then your MP goes like this and AP curve is something like this. So at this point, what happens? Your MP curve intersects AP curve. So we can say when AP is maximum, MP is equal to AP because it intersects at that point. So we can say yes, when AP is maximum, MP cuts AP. Okay, talking about the next question, obviously it was very simple. We were given the TFC as 30. We were given that AC is 3 and we were given quantity is 100. So it is quite obvious, we know total cost. We had to find total cost, which is equal to total variable cost plus total fixed cost. So we could have found out total variable cost by multiplying AC with quantity, that is 300. So 300 plus 30 gives us 330. So the answer was option D, which is 330. So I'm pretty sure most of you would have given the right answer. Right. Okay, moving to the 5th question, guys. I hope you all can see the answers. Okay, now 5th question was again a theoretical question, very direct, guys. We had to write down what is the problem of. We had to explain the central problem for whom to produce. So obviously we know for whom to produce is something which focuses on distribution of national income. Similarly, this or part of the question was which central problem regards with choice of technique. So it is obviously what? Which central problem, guys? It is how to produce. That is whether to go for your capital intensive technique or labor intensive technique. So which choice of technique is how to produce? Pretty direct, pretty simple. Going to the 6th question, guys. What is meant by inelastic demand and compare it with perfectly inelastic demand? So it is again a theoretical question from elasticity of demand, which we not expected, but again it is pretty simple because we know what is inelastic demand, guys. When your percentage change in demand is lesser or it is less responsive to a change in price. So it is quite obvious that your inelasticity becomes, that is the elasticity is less than 1. That is how we represent inelastic demand. But what happens in a perfectly inelastic demand, guys? The rest of the solution is the next page, of course, where your elasticity of demand is 0. This is how we show an perfectly inelastic curve, right? That is a straight line parallel to y-axis. So you just had to compare that, yes, in inelastic demand, the elasticity is less than 1. But in perfectly inelastic demand, the inelasticity is 0. That is, the elasticity is 0. So this is how you could have compared the two elasticities. Okay, moving to the next question, 7th. Again, it was very direct, guys. Given the price of a good, how will a consumer decide as to how much quantity to buy of that good? So in fact, I would say, guys, if you all had, performed the sample papers, the previous year questions, this was one of the questions from previous board years because it is very direct. We just have to explain consumer equilibrium in case of a single commodity. That is, when your marginal utility of a product is equal to the marginal utility of money, that is when the consumer achieves equilibrium, right? That is how he decides which or how much quantity to buy given a certain price. So you just had to explain how consumer can, attain equilibrium. So you could have drawn this diagram of equilibrium where obviously the marginal utility curve is intersecting with your marginal utility of money, which is obviously given by the price curve here. So this is how you could have represented this particular question. Okay, The or part of this question, guys, was again pretty easy. Okay, a part of this particular question was on the last page. So the or part was, what is the indifference curve and its properties? Again, very direct question, because you could have easily explained what is indifference curve. That is the curve which represents various combinations of two goods that provides a consumer with the same level of satisfaction. So you could have drawn an IC curve and stated that yes, these the bundles on the IC curve represents various levels of satisfaction. Okay, a particular level of satisfaction by different bundles. That is what IC curve shows. Also, the next part of this question, properties of indifference curve, very direct again. Indifference curve slopes downward to the right. Shape of the indifference curve is obviously depicted by MRS, diminishing marginal rate of substitution, that is, and two indifference curves can never intersect each other. So obviously, you could have explained any of the three properties of indifference curve. Very, again, simple question. Okay, moving to the eighth question, which was a numerical based question. So here we were given that, okay, your price of one commodity, that initial price is 4 rupees, which increased to 5 rupees. Also, the quantity supplied, again, this is QS, guys. It was based on elasticity of supply. So QS was 100 and the new price was 120. So obviously, we could have easily found out elasticity of supply. We know the formula: change in quantity supplied upon change in quantity, upon change in price multiplied by initial price upon initial quantity. So writing down all the values, obviously we found out the elastic supply is 0.8. And we also had to explain, guys, we not only had to find the elastic supply, but we also had to comment on the elasticity. So obviously, we know that elasticity is less than 1. So we can say that, yes, elasticity of supply is inelastic in nature because it is less than 1. And we know 1 is unitary elasticity and more than 1 is rather elastic. So obviously, the supply is inelastic in nature. So you have to write this particular solution in question number 8. Okay, talking about question number 9, again, a very direct question, guys. What is meant by price ceiling and what are its implications? If you had, again, done the previous year papers and you went through the top 100 questions, this question was very simple, very easy and very direct. Just had to explain that, yes, price ceiling is the maximum level of price imposed by the government, and you could have assisted it with a relevant graph. Nikita, I will be coming to that question. Obviously, I'm sure everybody wants to know the answer of that question, which was rather easy. So let's quickly move ahead, guys. So price ceiling was very easy, and you could have simply explained the implications: excess demand enhances welfare, fixed quota is there, and inferior goods. So these were some of the implications that you could have explained in this question. Okay, moving to the question number 10, guys, again, very direct. Explain the conditions of consumer equilibrium using indifference curve analysis. Again, guys, this question was exactly same, which was given in, one of the questions in top 100 questions given by American Nation. It was question number 11. So you just had to explain the indifference curve approach, how we attain equilibrium using the IC curve and the budget line. So obviously, the point where IC curve is tangent to the budget line, that is our equilibrium point. So you could explain by using the relevant graph and the condition. Very simple. Moving to the next question, guys, 11. Again, very direct. Simply, we had to write write down the conditions of producer equilibrium using the MR-MC approach. So we know the two conditions, guys, when MR is equal to MC, and the second most important condition is MC should be rising. So you just had to explain these two conditions that, yes, according to MR-MC approach, this is one of the conditions to attain equilibrium. And the second condition is that MC should be rising. Okay, and accordingly, you could have explained by using the relevant graphs and explanation of the same. Okay, so this was obviously a 6-mark question. So it would explain all the conditions properly and in an explanatory form. So this was quite easy. Okay, coming to the last question, that is a 6-mark question of micro. It was obviously, we had 2 or parts. So the first part was state 3 characteristics of monopolistic market and which of the characteristics separates it from perfect competition and why. So obviously, you could have explained any 3 features of monopolistic competition, and talking about the feature which separates it from the perfect competition is very simple. We know in perfect competition, we have homogeneous products, right? But in case of monopolistic competition, we have differentiated products. That is, the products are different from each other. They are not perfect substitutes. But we know in perfect competition, the goods are absolute. That is, they are perfect substitute with each other in terms of quantity, quality, color, size, etc. So you could have explained that, yes, this differentiated product feature is what separates monopolistic competition from a perfect competitive market. Okay. Yes, again, I know more or less everybody is wanting to know the answer to numerical questions. We are coming to that. Yes. Okay, the odd part of this question, guys, explain the implications of freedom to free entry and exit of the firms under perfect competition. Very simple. There exists zero economic profits in the long run. What is the implication? This is the implication. Okay, on the second part, non-price competition and oligopoly. Guys, this might be a bit difficult for some of the students, because non-price competition is in oligopoly is something which originates from product differentiation. That is, in oligopoly, there is non-price competition, which implies that the firms do not compete on the basis of price. Rather, they compete in terms of quality of the product. They spend in, like advertisements. They spend in, sales promotion activities so as to attract more consumers towards their product. So basically, the competition is in terms of the product or the style of the product rather than price. So this is what you have to explain in this particular question. Okay. How about perfect knowledge and lack of knowledge? Okay, Riaz, you could have. See, obviously, that is not the only point which differentiates the two markets. But yes, you could have written down about the perfect knowledge and lack of knowledge. Again, this point also, Riaz, the lack of knowledge, why does it originate? Because of differentiated products, right? In perfect competition, we have perfect knowledge because all the goods are homogeneous. So consumers and producers know about everything which is there in the market. But in case of monopolistic competition, due to differentiated products, there is lack of knowledge because not everyone can have the knowledge about everything, right? So your answer is correct, but it would have been better if you had, I hope you had written that, yes, this is also due to the differentiated products. Okay, coming to section B, guys, macro. Okay, in macroeconomics, guys, the first question was a bit tricky. I think many of you, I hope many of you wrote the right answer, guys. Okay, the question was, which of the following affects national income? GST, that is your gross goods and services tax, corporation tax, subsidies, or none of the above. Okay, Preda, good question. Obviously, guys, many of you might be thinking why subsidies and GST does not affect national income. Guys, we know what is national income, guys. It is NNP at FC, we know. Right, this is your national income we are talking about, not domestic income. So when we talk about national income, it is already at FC. It is factor cost. And what happens in factor cost, guys? We do not include net indirect taxes. Right, we all know that. And what is NIT? It is indirect taxes minus subsidies. So obviously, even net indirect taxes, we're not including while calculating national income. So obviously, any change in all these things would not affect our national income, right? But we know corporation tax is a direct component of profits, the operating surplus, so it will affect national income. But NIT would not. And we know GST is a kind of indirect tax. And of course, subsidies, it's itself a part of NIT. Therefore, the answer was corporation tax. I hope this clears all your doubts, guys. Why not GST or subsidies? Because we are talking about NNP at FC. And FC does not include NIT. That is your indirect tax or subsidies. Okay. Talking about next question, guys. Solution 14. That is, okay, 14 was very direct. What is money supply? So you just had to write a direct definition of money supply. Okay, question number 15. The central bank can increase availability of credit by which alternative? So the alternatives were raising repo rate, raising reverse repo rate, buying government securities, and selling government securities. So obviously, the answer was buying government securities. Okay, Siddhar, how corporation will affect NIT? Siddhar, no, corporation tax is not affecting NIT. It is affecting your national income. That is why corporation tax is the answer, right? Because corporation tax is a part of profit. That is your operating surplus. And operating surplus is a direct component of national income. That's why this is the answer and not subsidies or the GST. That is a kind of indirect tax. Okay, hope this clears your doubt. Okay, solution 15, guys. Buying government securities. Obviously, this is the right solution. Because if the central bank buys the securities, then it will give the money to the public. More money in the hands of the public means more demand of credit, more demand of loans. So we can say basically your credit increases if the RBI buys government securities. Okay. Moving to the next question, guys. 16th, again, it was a direct question, a very simple question. Why does the consumption curve does not start from the origin? Very simple, because of autonomous consumption. Obviously, even if the income level is zero, a consumer would consume something, basic necessities of life. So yes, the consumption curve would never start from origin. That is, this is the origin. So a consumption curve would always start from a point higher than the origin. Okay, that is the C curve. Okay, question number 17, guys. Which of among the following is final and intermediate goods? So obviously, milk purchased by a tea stall, it is a intermediate good because milk is being used to produce some other final good. Okay, so milk is intermediate good here. But in the other two options, that is the bus purchased by a school and juice purchased by a student from school canteen. So we know both these goods are being used for final consumption purpose, right? Not to produce something else. Therefore, these are final goods. Okay. Okay, the second part, the or part of this question was how can we convert, given national nominal income, how can we convert it to real income? So obviously, the formula we know, national income at current price divided by price index of the current year multiplied by price index of base year. So this is the formula as to how we can convert nominal income into real income. Okay, moving to the next question, 18th. So define multiplier. What is the relationship between multiplier and MPC? So we know multiplier is change in investment leading to corresponding change in the income and the output by multiple times. And the relationship we know, K is equal to 1 upon 1 minus MPC. So this is obviously the relation between MPC and multiplier. Okay, the next part of the question, if value of multiplier is 4, then what is MPC? So it is quite obvious. Just fill in the values and you'll get MPC as 0.75. So I hope you did it right. Yash, your multiplier question is here. Okay, Deepak, price ceiling, the necessary, the drawing was necessary. Deepak, again, it didn't mention, yes, but it would have been better if you had drawn the graph, that is it. Okay, but no worries. I hope the explanation is correct. I'm sure you will get the marks. Okay, 19th question, guys. It is very simple. How is RBI the lender of last resort? So you could have explained it. It is, again, a very direct question. So moving to the next question, what is meant by inflationary gap? And state 3 measures to reduce this gap. Again, very direct question, guys. You just had to explain the inflationary gap, which arises due to excess demand, right? So you could have drawn the graph of inflationary gap, right? This gap is what is, which represents inflationary gaps. So you could have drawn the graph, you could explain the same, and you could have explained the measures to reduce the gap. For example, raising the bank rate, or let's say the bank sells the securities, or it raises the cash reserve ratio, that is a CRR. So this was how you could have, explained the measures to correct the inflationary gap. Okay, the second part of this question again was very direct. Define aggregate demand and its components. You could have explained the 4 components of aggregate demand: the consumption, investment, the government expenditure, and of course, the net exports. Okay, coming to 21st question, guys. I'm sure everybody of you must be, had some trouble maybe in this question, guys. Okay, the question was the value of MPC is given as 0.6 and the initial income is 100 crores, and we had to draw a graph of income, consumption, and savings. Okay, so obviously here you could have easily found out different levels of income like 0, 100, 200, and so on. Similarly, you could have found out the consumption, because how do we find consumption, guys? MPC is given as 0.6. That means given a change in income, the consumption will change by 0.6. So yes, if initially the income rises from 0 to 100, your consumption is 60, savings is 40. When your income rises another 100, that is, it goes to 200, your consumption would be, your change in consumption means 0.06 multiplied by 100, that is 60. So 60 plus 60 is 120. And of course, saving is 80. So this is how you could have drawn the schedule. And we had to find the equilibrium level of income. So we know equilibrium is attained when Y is equal to C plus I. So at 200 crores level of income, that is at this level, our consumption plus investment, which was given as 80, that is 80. So obviously 120 plus 80 is 200. So this is your equilibrium level of income. Okay, Arav is asking, economic state of person will get benefited from NIT. We are talking about national income, dear, not the status. Okay, so we have to find whether national income is being affected. Your NNP at SC is being affected. So the answer was no, because it does not include NIT. Your NNP at MP, market price, includes NIT, right? So that was the difference. Two measures from fiscal and one monetary. Is it right? Yes, Alex, you just had to write measures. It could have been monetary or it could have been fiscal. Absolutely correct. Okay, Amandeep is asking, can be income difference 50 crores? Dear, the initial income is given as 100 crores. Yes, you could have, taken 50-50. It is not wrong. Yes, absolutely. It is absolutely fine, Amandeep. We just took 100 for easy purposes. You could have taken as 50. It is absolutely right. Okay, time is short. Moving to the next, guys. Solution 22nd. Again, it was a direct question. You just had to explain various kinds of deficit, revenue, fiscal, and primary deficits. You could have written down the formulas. And second was objectives of government budget, allocation of resources, and reduction in the income inequalities. Again, theoretical, very direct. 23rd question, guys. Explain the impact of rise in exchange rate on national income. Now, obviously, here what you had to explain was what happens when your exchange rate rises. That is, what happens when there is a depreciation. So we know when there is a depreciation, your exports increases. And if your exports increases means your BOP increases, your trade increases, and ultimately your national income also increases. So this was a positive effect on national income. Second was explain the concept of deficit. So we all know what is deficit in case of BOP. There are two accounts, capital and current. So in current account, the deficit is when your imports are higher. Whereas in your capital account, deficit is when your outflow of capital is higher. So you had to explain the same. Coming to the last question, guys, very important question and very simple, I would say, guys, because obviously you have to find NNP at market price and GDP at factor cost. So the formula for NNP at FC, first we know that, okay, through the income method, we have to include wages and salaries, undistributed profits, corporation tax, dividends, social security contribution, and mixed income. And why did we add net indirect tax, guys? Because the question asking for market price. So through the income method, if we add net indirect tax, we get net national product at market price. So this came out to be 3,700. And from this 3,700, we could have found out the second component, that is gross domestic product at factor cost. So we know from net, we had to go to gross. So we added depreciation, that is consumption of fixed capital. Then we have to go from national to domestic. So we deduct net factor income from abroad. But guys, in the question, what was given? It was net factor income to abroad, right? So we added net factor income to abroad. And lastly, we deducted net indirect tax because obviously we had to go from market price to factor cost. So pulling the values, we got 3,720 as GDP at FC. Okay. So I hope these were the solutions, guys. I hope you did well. Okay, 22nd question is only 6 lines. Said, okay, meditation was a question of it explaining deficit. Alex, you had to explain, yes, but the 6 lines, I mean, we could not had explained everything here because the time is short. But you could have explained deficit using the relevant, accounts and the relevant formula, that exports, imports, outflow and inflow of capital, etc. So I hope you did well, guys. Okay, forgot to add social security. Amandeep, you again 1 or 2 marks might be deducted because social security is a component of national income. Okay, why this consumption curve does not start? Gagan, because of autonomous consumption, dear. Even if your income level is 0, you will consume something, right? Therefore, the consumption does not start from origin. Okay, guys, these are the answers of today's paper. I hope you are satisfied and you all did well. You can find all the answers on Merit Nation's website also. It will be live in half an hour or 1 hour maximum. And again, I hope you all did well, guys. All the best for the future now that all the papers are over. So I hope you all have a good life. And all the very best for the future, guys, and for all the best for the results. We'll be very happy if you share your results with Merit Nation. We'll be happy in knowing that we were of some contribution to your, good marks. So with this, guys, let's say bye. And again, let's part on a happy note. All the best. Bye and take care, everyone.